lot of people believe that just exposing the cause of the trauma is the solution, and it really isn't. I mean, there's the process of letting it go, the process of forgiving it, the process of running its course and getting them to where acceptance is taking place and adaptation and adjustment is really taking place is the point. And so when they adapt to the trauma or the sensitizing event, that whole strategy of adapting to the sensitizing event is a different adaptation than regular everyday life. Right? Mm-hmm. So what can that cause? That can cause thrill seeking to infinity because they don't want to come down out of the intensity of it, or it can cause avoiding stimulus and wanting to be almost hiding out because they can choose many different ways to react to the same event. There's not one way that a person responds to that stimulus, is there? Hi, Robbie. You know, the thing that I wanted to mention, in helping people to get over what you're talking about, there's just so much to think about, because really, in NLP, they call some of that stuff compulsion blowout, right? Or belief blowout, where somebody's going along and everything's fine, and they all of a sudden they have some kind of disillusioning event. Like for some people, divorce isn't that big of a deal. For other people, it really is, as though they've been thrown off a building. I mean, the terror of it is awful, right? For some people, having a health problem is something they're accepting, while other people are completely traumatized by it. So what is one person's trauma may not traumatize another. What is one person's overwhelm might not overwhelm another. And it really does have a great deal to do with expectation, don't you think?
For sure. Yep.
So I think that everyone likes soap operas, everyone likes, a drama at the movies. There's no movie that goes, let's have a tepid hour and a half. Let's have a nice, easygoing hour and a half, right? So the issue is that as we grow up watching the movies, you understand that not only do we have the secondary benefit of sympathy that comes from other people after we get overwhelmed or shocked or go through some kind of trauma, but we also have the fact that our life starts to fit almost like the plot of a film. And we have more of our expectations built by cinema than we do by academics. We have more of our expectations built by certain stories than we do by real life. So I think as a practitioner, recognizing that the client is telling you a story and you're empathizing with them and you're in rapport, and it becomes pretty hard to remember that it doesn't have to be a trauma. Maybe it started out as a trauma. Maybe it started out as that bad. And, it could be a trauma like a soldier in war or in a way getting injured. It could be somebody finding out that someone they were close to was trying to kill them. It could be as simple as losing a job, or it could be the terror of having something very bad happen to a child in our family. But what we'll call these are deal breakers in the brain for why we're allowed to like life or calm down or chase a dream and whatnot. So if you've never been through one, it's hard to recognize how much of that can be physical. And that's why often, if you're a licensed track professional working with these cases is a certain way, you need to check with your jurisdiction to find out if you're a consulting hypnotist, what you can and cannot do with these types of cases. Should always operate in your scope of practice. But I think that our first big thing to recognize is that, wow, their nervous system is in a type of shock, fight or flight, or in an alternative universe trying to deny what they've been through, or not cope with what they've been through, because there's no reference for how or why you would cope with such a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that our first framework has to be recognizing that you might be dealing with someone going past that shock. I mean, true, like physical shock threshold, when it doesn't seem like what they're reporting in their history is that big. Whereas you also could be hearing a story that's truly sounds traumatic, and their nervous system, that person's nervous system, may never have got anywhere near shock or trauma. So it's difficult to wrap our mind around that the actual story, the actual historical things that happened, aren't what determine this shock or this trauma. And it's hard to process.
Mm-hmm. So the perception of the person in relation to what happened is the thing that makes the difference.
Yes. It sure is. It sure is. And now, how this helps us is we start to not get sucked into the story and believe that there's no other way for them to see it. You get that idea?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just my opening frame to the topic. I mean, ask away. Anything you'd like, Robbie.
So with what you just said, a lot of people who like to help people think that to be a good person, they must get sucked into the story or feel sympathy for the person and approach it from that point of view. And so I've found with people who train here to be hypnotists that that's something that we need to help people grow through, so that they don't. People like soap operas, and they also like to feel like they're a good person. So sometimes that's the focus that people have when they're helping people with this sort of thing.
I guess all I can share on that subject is what my belief is. In order to be a good person, I must follow the process for that client to get them where they need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is different than, in order to be a good person, I must go into sympathy to prove I care. I'll get in rapport with that person to a degree, but if I need to interrupt a pattern, or if I need to go a different way, or I need to use a different modality, including possibly the ending of the therapeutic relationship with that person, or shifting and creating a conflict, which is definitely a very small percentage of cases, but I mean, that does come up. And you need to be flexible enough to do what that person needs, do you not?
Yes, for sure.
So I think that my belief on it is, in order to be a competent person in that role, I need to be willing to do what it takes to take them through going from to denial to anger to bargaining to sadness to acceptance, and then from acceptance to the way that they're going to heal at this point. Now, if they have real physical trauma, I'd probably take them through it until they can become neutral about it in hypnosis, but not much. And I would use a structure like timeline from NLP rather than traditional regression, which we'll talk about on a separate podcast someday. But like, why use modalities that work better than, associated regression? Because we don't want to really install a false memory, and we don't want to cause false cause and effect relationships or get them to miss other things or whatever. So there's all kinds of reasons why we would use a certain way to process what they've gone through physically. What you're looking for is that they come down off of that heightened sense of alert or that heightened sense of dissociation. And you're looking for their being able to associate and dissociate in a normal flow, like they would to some degree if the trauma hadn't occurred. I mean, you're trying to either see them not coping by always dissociating and overanalyzing, or you're trying to see them not cope by, being in hyper vigilant intensity. You're trying to see that their mind can focus on others in a normal time frame, focus on themselves in a normal time frame, focus dissociated and thinking and associated and enjoying or whatever in, let's say, a casual, easygoing way, or at least a useful, mostly accurate way.